We are on.
Your
Okay.
your
Okay.
sound is on, but no screen yet.
And here we go. Here's the screen. Okay. Hi, friends. And good morning to you. At least here from Finland, it's good morning. And our subject, I think, is very interesting. I think last night, maybe we saw a few of you in our spontaneous identify as being meeting. We were studying identification, and we're going to continue to do that since it's such an important idea. Well, it's more than an idea. It's a state of consciousness, and it's more than a state of consciousness. It's a state of being. So every once in a while, I'll pull one of these spontaneous meetings, and I know it's not convenient for everybody. It's oftentimes at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night, GMT. So that that shouldn't be too bad for some, but for the people in the South Pacific, I guess you'd have to wake up pretty early. Anyway, let's just have a little alignment before we get into our subject matter, which today I think we'll be able to enter somewhat the crises of the soul as they are related to different astrological signs, and of course as we can triangulate them. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of triangulating. You can triangulate on the level, or with two above and one below, or one above and two below, or you can have three different levels for triangulation. What's important is what they bring to the human race and the ways in which we can participate. And yet at the same time, we have the opportunity to participate. I think maybe I've been a little bit low in the volume. I'm not sure here. Maybe this is going to be a little better. We'll see. You have the opportunity to participate in the normal triangles work, which in some ways seems so simple and is so effective and so important for humanity per se. Now, this organizing principle of triangles, it operates throughout the cosmos as far as we can see, and then, at a certain point, circles and spheres start to take over. But I wonder if they are triangulated just the way we see, let's say, the three Kumaras here, or the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost up here. They are a triangle of circles. And so maybe that's still a higher organizing principle. But the idea is just keep your eyes open for triangulation and the possibility of recognizing it, and even, certainly understanding it and then participating in it. So as many as we are, and when I'm giving these in the morning, because the United States is often to a certain extent excluded because of the time frame, that is when I'm in Finland, we have maybe a smaller amount of people than when we work in the evening. But that's okay. That's why Tuya and I are offering these programs backed up by our steady trio of orienters, which I call them, Joe and BL and Michael, keep us on track. So everybody gets a chance to have a reasonable hour, and then, of course, I convert these so you can play them on your, on your particular computer, and they'll be available on Makara, and to a certain extent, as we go along on the YouTube. Our YouTube problem is now straightened out as far as I know. Could be surprised and find that it isn't, but it looks like it is straightened out. And because of that, we'll be able to broadcast tonight at 5 p.m. GMT, our normal triangles work, which is so important. So if you're not yet in a triangle, see who around you would be willing to tune in with light and love, or just positive feeling, whatever you want to call it, and maybe say the great invocation. I think it's really important. So wherever we are, in terms of our little descent into matter from very high spaces, we relate to each other as soul-infused personalities, and even more, if we can identify ourselves that way, as souls upon the higher mental plane. And we can feel this energy, of the coming together of the members of the group. So it's not as if they are separated from each other and spread all over the place, but as if we form one sort of field of consciousness to which we are all contributing. And we somehow recognize that we are a triangle ourselves coming into being. As a soul, we are certainly a triangle. As a personality and as a monad, yeah. And even as a spiritual triad, we are a triangle. But from another perspective, we are monad triad soul. We are monad soul and personality. We are triad soul and personality. We are on every level. There's three parts to us plus some kind of synthesizing part that pulls it all together. When you see a triangle and it starts to rise from a middle point, then you've got yourself a tetrahedron, especially when the top point reaches the point where the sides of the tetrahedron are equal to the base. So, it's the old saying, God geometrizes, and more we'll learn about that. Okay. Now, like to welcome you, of course, and I can only do it once, as you know. So, hi, Anne and Annette and Antoinette and Barbara and Brennan and Catherine and Ishtar, Karen, Catherine, Leslie, Laurie, Mariana, Mariut, Martha, Rebecca, Risto, Tia, and I think, of course, Tuya's here with me. I don't know which side of the fence she's on here. Maybe I can move her over to the other side. And then Tia, I said, and Vera, Walter, and Anne Veronica. Yes, some of you were here with me just not long ago. So, we try to keep up this esoteric education. Blavatsky had a complicated way of saying it, but basically she was asking that occultism, and by that, of course, she means spiritual occultism, would win the day. and it would triumph at the end of this particular century. So we've got another 80 years, and even then we won't be quite and fully into the Aquarian age, but the sixth ray potencies and the Piscean potencies will, for this time, becoming negligible, at least on this particular cyclic level. There are ways in which, connected with the sixth ray, you've got much longer cycles. As I may have once said, or more than once, there's still remaining 21,000 years in a big sixth ray cycle, which is part of a fourth ray cycle of around 40,000 years, or rather a bit more. So the great science of cycles that is operative on the Buddhic, rather the atmic plane, that's what we're looking to understand, and the science of cycles will be found up here, and we will learn the divine plan, which is related to triangles, because through the number 3, we're going to learn how very well planned, according to cycles, all of the activities of for the human family are laid out. And, right now we're just going along and discovering that the spiritual world actually exists, okay. And it surely does. But there's a science to it all, And the number 3 is, along with 5, is closely related to the whole scientific aspect of bringing the divine purpose, the will of God, into a plan which manifests through the lower aspects of earth, and then we will have completed our redemptive task. So let us always remember that when we work with triangles with others, we are really part of a process of planetary redemption, and we're moving from the square to the triangle. Now, every Masonic participant will certainly recognize that in the Masonic apron, which is the inverted triangle immersed in the square. Well, it all depends. But that's not a secret that you can't talk about, because, so many Masons now are appearing in their charitable activities wearing their aprons. So there's a huge symbol right there. The triangle penetrates the square. And DK in the Raves and Initiations, he gives a marvelous idea of that, and it might be, I don't know, it's the kind of thing that I could easily get lost trying to find, but I think it's in the third rule, and and somehow, if I could find it quickly, I would, but anyway, look up the third rule, I think, and it's all about sound and, that's it. Found it. Imagine. Without too terrible to search. See, so this is related also to the Masonic apron and how the diminution of matter, and you can see the various triangles and diamonds involved here, until we become not a big presence in the middle of our field of consciousness, we become in Leo the relinquished point. When you meditate upon that, that's an amazing idea. And then, once we relinquish, the center of the stage, which is really hard for the Leo type, we find that the center is everywhere, everywhere, and the circumference nowhere. Okay, so now I've got some reading that we can get into a little bit, and where we stopped last time. Yeah, we stopped here, and let's see if there's anything. We were talking about the merging of Virgo and Leo and the fact that it represents the Sphinx, especially when the woman is in the preeminent position and the body is that of a lion. And, you know, the question always being asked is, what is man? Who are you, you know? What goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs at night? And the answer is man, you know. And you can figure that one out, I'm sure. So we're talking about also the dualism of the human spirit and matter. And in that way, Leo can be looked at as the sign representing spirit and Virgo matter. So in the old days, there was much division and reamalgamation of the different constellational sources. And it depended a lot upon what the human race could receive. You know, when we say that, okay, there were 8 constellations or signs in those days, and then there were 10, and then there were 11, and then there were 12, and so forth. It doesn't mean that those constellations didn't exist. The problem was, of course, could humanity respond to them? So, the war of the pairs of opposites, spirit and matter, in some ways it's a very Sphinxian war, in this case with Leo preeminent and Virgo representing matter, a war with purpose. And interestingly enough, DK is writing 80 years ago here. One of the first things he's going to write about is astrology, he seems to be telling us. It's a war with purpose, and the pairs of opposites are at war. Well, check out your own energy system and see whether the pull of the personality and its various desires and intended satisfactions is at war with the part of you that really wants to give and contribute and help and be selfless and not think so much of your own limited welfare, but like the Christ, the welfare of others. I'm sure we all fight this out. And it goes on for quite a while, and it can become very, very subtle. So you kind of enter, you know, the story of Leo, where the higher lion hunts the lower lion. The soul is hunting the personality, and finally won't let it escape through the back door of the cave, as it were. Some amazing stories that have come down to us from antiquity. Remember that Hercules wasn't some strong man showing up at some point in history, but was a first-rate soul who was also a teacher, and he taught his Atlantean students millions of years ago through the drama. So, you know, first ray, second ray, fourth ray, maybe sixth ray. He had all that, and the drama, the labors of Hercules were actually dramas about the method that the soul used, our inner self, to achieve freedom. And whatever you're born in or under, it's a combination of those things. We're all in prison here, you know, until maybe the fourth initiation, and we're learning how to free ourselves in 12 different ways from these prisons. Of course, the triangles are there in the 3 fire signs, 3 earth, 3 water, 3 air. Everywhere are the triangles. Now, we got as far as, I don't know how far, maybe not too far. 471, that's it. And maybe we only worked with 4, I think we were earlier. I think so. 468, something like that. We're not, covering a lot of pages. That's not the point. The point is to understand that we are evolving beings in universe. Last night, I said to one of our inquirers that there was no evolution. This is always a distressing thought to people. There's no improvement. Well, that's only in the utterly radical perspective. When you realize that your true nature is the absolute cannot improve. And when you realize that, in a sense, your true nature is absolute infinity, it can't improve. But in a finite universe, there can be constant improvement of the little projected extension of the universal logos, which each one of us is. So I think I once lost a friend over this question about whether there was improvement or not improvement from universe to universe. It's funny how we can take offense at certain things. All right, anyway, so we looked at this relationship between Virgo and Leo and Pisces. And we discussed pretty much Virgo and Leo. Now, we didn't discuss Pisces, okay? And I think, you can identify this triangle, Leo, Virgo, Pisces, the individual in Leo, the higher and lower pairs of opposites in Virgo, and a great universality as which we can identify, found in Pisces. So we're all on our way, not to the lower part of that triangle, because Pisces can really be, at first, a very deluding sign, go forth into matter. It's like the very first incarnation. Go forth into matter and be completely swallowed by the whale, as Jonah was. Just become engulfed and overwhelmed, as Jupiter and Neptune together can make possible. But later, you gain your freedom. So, another stream of energy is also pushing through and producing effects upon those in the human family, not all apparently, who not only respond to the Leo force and are consequently individuals in their own consciousness, but are responding to the steadily expanding Christ consciousness. Now, this is provided by Virgo, what he calls the steadily expanding Christ consciousness. It's an ancient sign. You know from your reading probably that the constellation Cancer ruled the first half of the previous major solar system, whereas the constellation Virgo ruled the second half. And it's still very active. It's changed its major ray emphasis, probably from the third and seventh ray to the second and sixth ray, which decay gives us. So this stream is pushing through for those who have begun to be real individuals and emerge from the Cancerian mass thinking and feeling, and they are experiencing also the expanding Christ consciousness. Now, there's another place in the book where he pretty definitely tells you that Virgo represents the individual Christ, and that it is Aries that represents the cosmic, true cosmic Christ, the Lamb slain from the foundations of the world. Okay, so we are then experiencing the expanding Christ consciousness. Of this expanding consciousness, they are becoming aware in their own individual experience. And of course, we better have every month a sense of awareness about the energies that are available. Otherwise, we're just talking, okay? And there's nothing being felt, and we need that, okay? Now, and what we're talking about, this other energy pushing through, this is the higher, not lower, which is so psychic and misleading. This is the higher aspect of the energy of Pisces. It is awareness of the group, of the whole, and of the universe. That's a really big thing. So, you realize that that Aquarius is oftentimes called the sign of universality and universal love, especially, whereas Pisces is related to pervasive wisdom. But there is a huge love content in Pisces, and it is, I think, the still deeper form of identification and universalization than can be achieved in Aquarius alone. So this higher aspect of Pisces is pushing through, and this is despite the fact that we are ending a Piscean age, even a big one. In another few hundred years, the 25,000-year age of Pisces will be terminated. But Pisces, even though it's fading out in terms of a lesser equinoctial age of about 2,160 years, it's fading out that way. It's always around because it is a huge second ray decanate. And in a way, Christ is the exemplar, just as Hercules is the exemplar of the great first ray decanate of Scorpio, and the Buddha the exemplar of the great third ray decanate of Taurus. So this massive, expansive awareness of the whole and of the universe has to do with the liberated Piscean consciousness, which is, the energy of consummation. So this is a very important triangle for all of us. Now, a lot of us, we're not yet, we're not yet individuals. It's almost like it goes like this. Pisces, go forth into matter. Virgo, let matter reign. Leo, let other forms exist, I rule. But then it continues with a higher Leo. I am that I am, I am that, and that am I. And Virgo, the Christ consciousness, dividing man in consciousness into a higher and lower pair of opposites. And then finally, Pisces, loving, identificatory, universalization. So it goes like this, if I can put it. this way. He goes from, without erasing everything, Pisces, Pisces, Virgo, and Leo, and Leo, and Virgo, and Pisces. See, always remember the higher and the lower expressions of the signs. In any one individual, they won't be expressing both ways particularly dramatically, because we are all at a certain level, and none of us anymore are part of this first one, Pisces, Virgo, Leo. We have become individuals, and we have spent time as an individual, and we have relinquished individualism, which is still a separative state, and we've entered true individuality. What a word. And basically, it when you're looking at that in the correct way, it talks about the indivisibility of the human interior being. And Leo represents that with isolated unity. So you see you have a triangle leading to and a triangle leading from. And probably we could find other triangles in that way. I think one of the important things in your life, my life, would be to identify the triangles which are really important. Now, for all of us, the moon, the sun, and the rising sign would be important. That is an important triangle, and sometimes they're in the same, the different positions are in the same sign. But the personality vehicles are found in relation to the moon. The entire personality, increasingly soul-infused, in relation to the sun, and the driving energies of the rising sign, driving us closer to the center of our life, are found in relation to the soul. Now, that's just one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is what we call the triple sun, and we start with the sun sign, we go to the rising sign, and then we go to the sign opposite the sun sign, if we can begin to have some excuse me. I'm sorry. Getting a little bit dry. If we can go to the monadic sign in our chart, which is the sign opposite the sun sign, a very important triangle. So we've got to find out which triangles are really important in our individual life and in our group life and in our planetary life and in our solar systemic life, and eventually on beyond that. Okay. So the higher aspect of Pisces is pushing through. It is awareness of the group and of the whole and of the universe. What's a universe anyway? Our idea of what a universe is has expanded tremendously over the past 100 years. Sometimes DK uses the word universe as if it simply means solar system. And that is, I suppose, from his period, when he was writing this, a fairly legitimate way of addressing the concept of the universe. But then there have been these incredible discoveries about the vastness of it, and we're nowhere near the end of those discoveries. So anyway, now we're in Pisces. It's the Christ, and a triangle of teachers is Hercules, the Christ, and the Buddha. A big triangle of teachers. So from Pisces comes the energy of Buddhi. Pisces, Neptune, Buddhi. Neptune is the hierarchical ruler, and it is one of the major rulers of the Buddhic plane. We see our Buddhic plane here and realize it's ruled by 3 planets, particularly another Buddhic triangle of planets. You know, I'm listing these things and how they're related if you want to take them down. And maybe you know this one, but it would be Neptune, Jupiter, and Mercury. Those would be the 3 planets making a triangle which particularly rule the Buddhic plane. The kind of the identification with other things and other beings of Neptune, the inclusiveness of Jupiter, and the pure, intuitive reason of Mercury. Those would be the way in general that those planets worked in relation to the Buddhic plane. So it's the energy of Buddhi, the higher aspect of the lower psychic nature. So many psychics are bewildered, overcome with phenomena, proud of it, even though they forget that animals have the same psychism, and that back in Atlantean days, millions of years ago, they were completely absorbed in this type of psychism. So we've got to get our history straight and not become inflated over what is now unusual simply because it hasn't been operative for some millions of years. The higher aspect of the lower psychic nature. It is now. Alice Bailey she wondered what her rising sign is. She never knew it exactly. But a number of astrologers did do her chart and pretty well determined that rising sign was Leo. But there was a time, and maybe she accepted that too, she was friends with Dane Rudyard. And Rudyard was an excellent astrologer, as you know, and it was sometimes asked, well, why isn't Rudyard in your groups? And the answer came from the Tibetan, because he's a world disciple. And I suppose that means he's a third-degree initiate with his own field of service. Anyway, he was friends with Alice Bailey, and he did her chart, and Mark Edmund Jones, you know, the academic dean of all the astrologers, he did her chart too. I don't know, I hope Jones was not too accurate, because I once had a reading from him long, long ago. I drove 700 miles to have that reading, and he said, now, you know, the arts are great, but never get into occultism, he said to me. So I said, uh-oh, maybe I've gone astray here into occultism. But he was a fine old man, and many of you will be happy to know that although his books may have proved unreadable to some, he spoke in a much simpler language when he actually talked to you, you know. So you could get what he was saying, even though sometimes reading it, it was difficult to know how to process all that. Okay, so the mediator, that's what Alice Bailey thought she was. She says, maybe I have Pisces rising, she said. It is the aspect of the mediator in contradistinction to the medium. The medium does not really keep his or her own consciousness, even though there is a higher form of medium in Virgo than in Pisces or Cancer. usually the medium loses consciousness and something else is talking. But a mediator, okay, maybe that begins with a higher psychism, and it is possible to speak of the inner things and retain your consciousness and retain the intuition. So here we go. It says it is intuitional control in Pisces, and this is a good summary. Intuitional control instead of intellectual over-lordship of Leo, and Rudyard was very fond of using that particular phrase, and the limitations of Virgo when it is being limited. You know, it's a very finite kind of sign, and it has to do with the limitations of form. But later, the higher Virgo is the Christ consciousness breaking through and shattering those very limitations. So, you know, Leo is ahamkara. Who am I really? Am I just the individual? Am I the I am? Am I just the soul? Am I am that? Am I something higher altogether? I am that and that am I? Or am I the mysterious, which the Tibetan does not mention, but Moses on the mountain, he asked God, what is your name? And back came the phrase, which is related to the highest Leo phrase, but not exactly the same. I am that I am. I am that am I. I am that I am. So you can chew on that one. I am that I am, and it has to do with his the deity's uniqueness. So Leo is the ahamkara. It's a huge veil. Sometimes we see, hey, Vulcan is veiled by the sun. Uranus is veiled by the sun. Neptune is veiled by the sun. What does that mean? It means that the lower ahamkara, or the lower sense of identity, prevents the higher energies of Vulcan, Neptune, and Uranus from really getting through to the consciousness. He says, look, the unveiled Neptune is very difficult, very hard to deal with. You don't want to go into that unprepared. But one day, that sense of ahamkara begins to expand, and we're no longer this tight little lower ego, and we're getting ready to unveil, and we can experience Vulcan, Neptune, and Uranus in a truer way. So Virgo has that shattering pressure of the Christ consciousness. It shatters the unity of Leo. You know, there is a lower unity. It's not always that the higher lion is pursuing the lower lion of personality, the king of beasts. Sometimes there's just one lion, the king of beasts, and the higher of the pairs of opposites has not appeared. Eventually, I suspect there will be 3 lions, and one will represent the monad, and then Pisces, the group, the whole, the universal. So these 3 energies are today playing potently on humanity. See, he's looking always at the big picture because, after all, that is what is important. Producing, number 1, the self-consciousness of man as he emerges out of the mass. Mass consciousness, we know, is Cancer. We think alike, we feel alike, we are conditioned. We don't break out of that shell in the early Cancerian days, and we're pretty much like everybody else. Now, what happens with Leo is some degree of uniqueness begins to emerge. But increasingly in this day and age, the self-consciousness of man through Leo emerges out of Cancer, the diffused light, and a point appears. That point is, in the beginning, a unique point. Then next, what happens next is the recognition of the Christ life and nature as the aspirant for the first initiation emerges out of the group of world individuals. Now, this is interesting because Leo has a lot to do with the first initiation. As a matter of fact, he tells us how to locate it in certain people. It's taken in Leo or under Leo as the rising sign, and he also relates Virgo to the first initiation. In my book on the egoic lotus, another ebook, on Makara, which is being transcribed, and quite a bit of it has been transcribed over the last few years. I go into real detail about how to read these signs at different levels and how to see how each one of them, in each one of the petals, can be participating in the experience of that petal and whether it's appropriate in the initiation offered through the unfoldment of that petal. In the case of Leo, when you have your fifth petal ruled by Leo, Aries and so forth, up to the number 5, then you've taken the first initiation. And as you really learn to relinquish more and more on behalf of the group and make those humble sacrifices that are so necessary, you may be moving towards the complete unfoldment of the sixth petal, with activity going on, of course, in the eighth petal. Then you've taken the second initiation. And when all 3 petals in the initiatory tier of sacrifice petals are open, you have taken the third initiation. So these are the phenomena that occur along with the expansion of consciousness. So the 3 energies playing upon humanity produce the self-conscious man. That's number 1 in Leo. He says this in itself is a problem, because a lot of people will be emerging into a separative, individualistic consciousness until their tower falls somewhere in the middle of the Leo petal experience. It becomes the blasted tower, and it crumbles to the ground under the influence of lightning, and they start the path of the humble aspirant, which leads them by the end of that petal to the first initiation. So, among DK's students, they were mostly first-degree initiates, sometimes not even when he was marking someone out for special protection or instruction, but they were, by and large, first-degree students closing in on the control of the astral body, so they could say that, in fact, they were second-degree students. A few of them were taking that degree or saw it immediately ahead. So it's Virgo where we really begin to recognize the Christ life born of the Virgin, what really is the earth itself. And, in the Blue Rose Sisterhood, Tuya is dealing with a lot of this cultivation of the Christ consciousness, and with the role of Mary, who is symbolically the earth in this emergence of the Christ consciousness. It's a real Leo-Virgo effort. Okay, so we emerge, we're not just some brilliant, wonderful individual. We're emerging out of the group of world individuals, and we have our own humility now, a little bit more humility, as we are on our way to the real first initiation. So there's all kinds of famous people in the world, and they're not even aspirants yet. They're quite selfish, but they're very effective. So anyway, this Christ consciousness, when it kind of divides you in half, and you've got a higher self and a lower self, and a higher power and a lower power, it's pretty much Virgo, pretty much, even though there's a higher lion and a lower lion. And finally, we get to what we've been talking about, number 3, the awareness, universal in nature. And here I guess I've just got to say this universal awareness has to do with our solar system. I think so. With our solar system. Our awareness then goes on, it's universal, and it is the initiate's awareness. And notice what he was a member of and what he's coming out of. Not just the mass of individuals this time, but he's emerging from the ranks of the world disciples and becoming the true initiate. So this universality increasingly of realization is what produces the true initiate, because the initiate is distinguished by a unique type of consciousness. Now this occurs in Pisces, and certainly Aquarius is helping this along. You can take the 5th initiation in Aquarius, and you can take the 5th initiation in Pisces. Now, people like ourselves, we're not worried about the 5th initiation right now. It would be really nice if all of us could secure the fact that we have taken the 1st initiation, and we've had the birth of the Christ in our heart. Let us not underestimate that achievement. Okay. So that's a little bit more about this particular triangle. All this is therefore brought about at this time by the steady inflow of the energies of Leo, Pisces, Virgo, or I would tend to call it in a different order, Leo, Virgo, Pisces, and these lie behind the very rapid unfoldment of the 3 types of consciousness to be found in varying degrees in humanity today. Lots of individuals, but they're still in the hall of ignorance to a certain extent. Then there's lots of people who are struggling between the higher self and the lower self, and Virgo is offering the opportunity for that struggle. And then there are some who just have such a universal consciousness that they see everything as if it were a wholeness. And this would be the Piscean consciousness and the Aquarian consciousness. Well, it's quite obvious that I'm going to have to leave the crises of the soul until next time. But it's very interesting, these crises of the soul, and they are associated with certain constellations of the zodiac, and then there are other constellations which just are not associated with humanity's soul crises. So I think we'll do better when we undertake that fresh. Now, what I'm trying to do here, it must be obvious. Whether I manage or not will depend. So I think that was page 471, and we made it to 472. We're really burning up the pages here. So today was the end, and it is the 21st of August, and we went from 471 to 472, and the ending here was a morning session. And then when we look over on this side, on the 28th of August, which will already be into Virgo, we will have the signs of triangles, and it will be a evening session. Okay. Oh, come on now. It's going to give me a problem. Okay, there we go. Evening session GMT. And it will be from pages 472, and I think we'll just be on that one page, because those are the 7 crises of the soul, of incarnation, orientation, initiation, renunciation, the crisis of the battlefield, the crisis of the birthplace, the crisis of the burning ground. Now, those are really important, and anybody who works with human beings to try to help them through their various difficulties has to be aware of which crisis that individual might be experiencing. So it's a very practical part of the book, and of course, when you go along, you can triangulate them in terms of succession and so forth, beginning, middle, and end, and so forth. So keep your eye of triangulation peeled so you can see where they do exist. Okay, friends, now, obviously, I've gone on and on as, what did they say, a 12-step program for children recovering, a 12-step recovery program for children recovering from having Gemini parents. And it's called On. Okay, I have a significant Gemini in my charts, so, and especially these days. Now, your thoughts, your comments, your ideas, this is time for them before we have just a little bit of a meditation, and the real meditation tonight on the broadcast, the YouTube broadcast. So is there anybody that wants to say something, ask something, get into the subject matter? I hope you've been taking notes and you understand, look, that these triangles, you have been through it, you're going through it. And I would say that most of us are in the stage of the higher lion. That's not part of this particular presentation, but in the labors of Hercules, the lion who hunts the lion, as Tuya often says, being very Leo herself. And then most of us are in the stage not of the lion of individualism, but the Virgo energy, bringing the Christ to light and to life in a pair of opposites, a higher of the pairs of opposites, the soul, and the lower of the pairs of opposites, the personality. I don't think any one of us, although we might get flashes, is yet in the full universalization of Pisces. So basically, we've been continuing this time dealing with this triangle, which is so important in developing human consciousness: Leo, Virgo, Pisces. So, make note of that. And as I say later, when this particular chapter is done, Starling Hunter, who has been really, writing on triangles for years and years, he's gone into it so deeply. He's got some papers that will allow us to focus on various triangles and try to see what their function and role may be. Okay, your thoughts, your statements, whatever, if you like. Okay, something is looking like.
Vera has her hand up.
Okay. Vera.
Yeah. Hello, Michael. As you were talking and I was listening, I think I joined some dots.
Okay.
I have a friend, and she is stock Capricorn in that more superficial way, and also no, I'm not going to bother with her. But I just realized that maybe she is facing that first initiation. She lost everything: relationships, money, health. And I thought, wow, this is me to support somebody. And in spite of the fact that she doesn't want to hear, she thinks it's all nonsense, this spiritual stuff, I still have to find a way to support, to support her. Man, don't know how, but yes.
So did you say it's a relative, a daughter, a sister? Who is it?
No. It's a friend sort of my age, but I know she has a good heart.
Yeah.
I know that. So.
Well, that's the thing, of course, because the birth of the Christ in the heart is partially ruled by Capricorn. And as we know, Capricorn operates through all the first 5 initiations. So there's going to be kind of a different burning ground for each one. Maybe as we approach the 4th degree, burning ground is a bit different because we're not on any cross in particular, but there is a final burning ground approaching the 5th. So even at the 1st degree, it's Christmas. It's the birth of the Christ. You're getting deprived of many of the non-necessities so you can awaken to the issues at hand, which is, of course, the opening of the heart center in some technical way. We don't know how far, but opening of the heart center and the birth of this higher consciousness within it. And it's great, such an individual may say, oh, it's all nonsense, blah, 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 but they're grateful to be able to talk to you and to be reminded that something more than just unhappiness may be occurring. I've got a friend, he lives in Berlin, and we've been friends for 70 years, for heaven's sake. And he's just brilliant along the 3rd and 5th grade line. And he thinks everything I say along these lines is utter nonsense, but he listens. He listens. Because the whole issue of death is there. When you get to be in your late 70s, you've got to think, hey, you might be on the other side any minute here. So he listens and is somehow glad to hear these things, even though his manas will reject them. As Master Mori was so interesting, he said, look, be very careful. Use the power of suggestion, because if you're too straightforward, the manas of your interlocutor will reject what you have to say. So it's almost like it operates independently. So you're doing some good work, and before you know it, it will take hold. It's a big job, and oftentimes in our own families, we face the disbelief. As a matter of fact, that's one of the places where most probably we face it strongly. That, the people that we've been born into, are very different in their beliefs along these lines, and may think, that when we get into the spiritual area, we've gone off our rocker. But I think it's a good thing to go off your rocker, because if you're just sitting on the front porch rocking away as you get older, not too much is accomplished. I'd rather be off my rocker than on my rocker, as they say. So keep up the good work. You'll manage somehow to get through. I think so.
It was more reminding to myself not to be selfish myself and do something for another person. So that was more like that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's important. That's important. And you will find, there's a great satisfaction in serving others. Basically, DK has said, from Esoteric Psychology too, that real service is even more important and more, I want to use a word like spiritually propulsive, even than meditation. And then it makes you pause. Wait a second, aren't we getting there through meditation? And real service takes a still more preeminent role. So anyway, there's many ways we can help, many ways. And
Thank you.
They will come to you. Those ways will be presented to you. And we'll have to just recognize them. He says, what does he say? Psychic awareness of another person's needs is the true psychism. That's the true psychism. Awareness of the need of another. Okay, thank you, Vera. Okay, other thoughts. Here we are, we're individuals trying to cultivate the Christ life, not yet the cosmic Christ, just the individual Christ would be good enough, and then eventually going beyond the individual into the group and into the wholeness and into the universal. That's where it will all lead. We can only imagine what is the consciousness of the Buddha and the Christ, who have not yet completed the seventh initiation. And yet, their focus is on the plane of the logoic plane, the plane of Adi, and they have a universal focus if we consider the universe to be a solar system. So there's plenty to do here, folks, other than, as they say, put on the white robe and play the harp. Not all people gravitate towards the harp, though it's a wonderful instrument, and that might be pure hell to practice harp all day in the heavenly worlds. So a lot lies ahead for us. Other thoughts?
Ishtar has a question.
Okay.
She says, does the crisis of initiation show in the birth chart?
That's a both and question. And it's a good question. Let's just say there's a lot of people born more or less at the same time all over the world, and they may even have the same rising sign as, you look at it and the sun moves only 1 degree per day, roughly. And the moon moves a little more rapidly, about 11 or 12, or maybe tops 14, 15 degrees a day. And so you got a lot of similar charts. And the question is, what are you, the inner being, doing about it? In other words, a chart alone is just one chart. And there are people who say there's an ABC chart. Okay, so the A chart is, let's see, how do we do that? Yeah, animation chart. The heart starts beating, it's connected with the astral plane. I don't know how many days after conception, but it's an important interim chart ruled by Neptune. Then there's the B chart. It's the Saturn chart. It's the birthday chart, or the actual incarnation in flesh chart. And we tend to think and say, hey, that's the one. It's the one, but not the only one. And then there's the conception chart, which is related to Uranus. So we have the three synthesizing planets in these three charts, two of which are quite internal and have to be determined very carefully, if we can do that. Charles Jane had his work along this line, and I met him back 34 years ago, and he died that same year. So he was passing the torch, and I passed it on to a lot of other people who had an interest in that type of work. But there are many, many internal charts. And if you talk to Nicholas Nilan now, who seems to be sort of a placeholder here, and Malvin Artley and some of these other people, there are 40 or 49 charts that everybody would have. So let's just say that the birth chart is really important, but the other charts are also important and indicative. The appropriation process, as wherever you are, you're in heaven or wherever you are, the bell rings, the school bell, and it's time for another incarnation. It can take years to descend and reappropriate the mental, emotional, and etheric vehicles. Some people who are a little bit farther along, can head right in again. Others have to reappropriate, and it takes years. So, yes, if you've identified more or less their state of evolution, and you see inside even the birth chart, a configuration which correlates with the state of evolution you have identified, then you've got some pretty good indicators there. You still don't know whether they're going to do anything about it, but if they do something about it, they've got the right equipment to do it. Now, DK said something that may disappoint some people, maybe all of us. He says, hey, you're ready for initiation. Oops. Trouble is, for the rest of your incarnation, the astrological configuration that you need to take this initiation does not show up. So you've got to wait for your next one. It's a bit like the Buddha in the moon chain. We're told he's ready for the third initiation. However, at that period of moon chain living, it wasn't being offered. So he had to wait for the whole next solar system before he could take the third initiation, which he did with the Christ as a duo, as a pair in Atlantis in the fourth ray ashram. So it does show up in the chart if you are a worker along those lines. Of course, what initiation you may be taking, whether it's first, second, or third, whatever, rarely the fourth, okay. That's between you and your master. If there's some other disciple with whom you have very good relationship and a very clear and understanding relationship, you can discuss those things with such a person and they with you. But the effort of the individual is paramount, and to be at the stage of evolution where the configuration counts. Now, look, everybody's got this sun, rising sign, monad point, opposite the sun sign. Well, it's probably, when you can't even fulfill the rising sign in terms of the soul, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to jump to the monad and say, okay, hey, my monadic point is in Libra or Capricorn or whatever. It doesn't make sense because you haven't done the preliminary groundwork. But if you're at the point where it can be identified that you've done the preliminary work ahead of time, then you can use the monadic point. So the big thing is, he says, if you're going to help people, approximately know what stage of evolution they are working through. And that takes some experience, doesn't it? We have to work with a lot of people and a lot of charts and all that to get the sense of who's working on what. Okay, Ishtar, so I hope that gives the idea along those lines. I mean, I'm so looking forward to what Master DK is going to say. He says, he's very, around the year 2025. I have a friend, maybe sometimes I should preface all this by saying I had a friend. Anyway, I've had certain friends who I once were real friends, but we got split up over the basis of whether pink and purple ink represented the Tibetan on the internet. Anyway, there my friend is, with pen in hand, at midnight on January 1st in the year 2000, waiting to take dictation directly from the Tibetan. Well, it probably really doesn't work that way. And whatever was written down, I'm sure was very good in its own way, but probably the Tibetan would see the glamour involved in that of being the specially selected one to do this, and would not, could not stimulate that, would not stimulate that. We all make crazy mistakes, and then later we see what we've done and correct them, and eventually we're in a pretty good stage because we've corrected a lot of mistakes. Okay, Ishtar, thank you. Anything else, friends? Anything else? Along the lines that we have been pursuing largely, Leo, Virgo, Pisces, and the way I showed it to you was Pisces, Virgo, Leo, Leo, Virgo, Pisces. A triangle leading to, and a triangle leading away from. And it's a great thing to start to be sensitive to these energies, which are ambient, present at certain times more intensely than others. Really use the energies. Really use them. Okay, what else? Anything else? Look, you're getting a little dose of esoteric astrology here, aren't you? It's, the science of triangles is almost inseparable from the science of the rays and the science of astrology and the science of the chakras. You're going to find triangles running through each of those three areas. So inevitably, when we're dealing with astrology, you're going to have to learn some astrology to study the science of triangles. And when you're dealing with the rays, there's all these ray triangles. And you're going to have to learn about those when studying the rays. And when it comes to the chakras, you know that DK has given, let me see if I go to it very quickly, treatise on whatever, and cosmic fire. And this is going to be all about triangles. Here we're studying the chakras at different stages of human evolution, and it's all about triangles, isn't it? Only what's arranged is the triangles of chakras. So whether you're arranging triangles of chakras, triangles of astrological factors, triangles of rays, the triangular arrangement, at least as far as we're concerned, living on a non-sacred planet is a paramount thing. We're not yet getting into the circles, okay? Not yet. Or the spheres. And, about it, he says very, very little. And so we're learning about different types of human beings. Sometimes he says, okay, there's 3 types. Okay, there's 2 types. Okay, there's 7 types. And then he expands it, Right now he's dealing with 3 types: individuals, those who have a higher power and a higher of the pairs of opposites, and a lower, and then those who are really free and they're like a master and they've broken into a wider identification, and inclusive identification. And that lies ahead for all of us, and may we get there as soon as possible so we can be of some use and some help. Anything else, friends, before we have just our little closing reflection? As I say, tonight, using the YouTube link, maybe Joe, would you be so...
You want that in the chat box? Sure.
Yeah, put that one in the chat. I mean, everybody almost knows it, but we had a little trouble with it, but now we're hopefully back to normal. And tonight at 5 p.m. GMT Tuya will lead us in the real triangles meditation. But now we're a bit cosmic at the moment, Okay. Whoop. Just want to make sure I've got everybody. So far it seems that I do. So far it seems that unless, Joe, you can identify someone that I've missed, then we're okay. So let's just have a little closing. This is a long-term project, people. The seed group project, in which there are also triangles, lasts 275 years. And only 100 years of that has passed. It hasn't even passed. And the Tibetan is going to be one of the externalizing masters, as is obvious and is stated. So there's going to be much more direct instruction, and we're all going to be able to benefit from it more. And Joe has just put in the chat box the information we need for the broadcasts coming on tonight, and then all week we'll continue. The next webinar will be in the evening. It'll be a glamour webinar on Friday. And we've been lots of glamour running around these days, and we've been trying to do our bit to weaken that glamour. Okay, so just a little bit. Now, a little bit. So the Tibetan, in a way, he wants to work with us every morning, and we simply somehow realize that the Master, the Solar Angel, and the top of the head provide a triangle which we can visualize, and the major color of the solar angels, which is orange fundamentally, orange, yellow, etc., is absorbed within the personality. And we, bathe in this descending light as we would bathe in the waters of the sea, and we leave the basic manipulation behind the scenes. We leave it to the inner teacher. And the Tibetan said, okay, I know how to handle this, so you don't have to worry about this. And we're visualizing our own network. Try to get into at least one triangle somehow. It may take a little initiative, but, somewhere you have two friends who believe that there is a hidden reality and they would like to help. And just tell them it's really a good way to help. And then you'll have your own triangle. And, some people have many. And they work on it every day. Well, okay. We can't go through every one of our triangles, but the idea is it's a network. And finally, on our planet, it involves the three Buddhas of activity, the whole planetary network, and our own little network. But in our studies, in the science of triangles, it's going out into the solar system. We'll be studying these planetary triangles, such as, let's say, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Venus, Mars, Earth, three synthesizing planets. Those triangles. We'll study the ray triangles from the zodiacal perspective. And we can speculate about, cosmic triangles, but it's just speculation. Triangles all the way, organizing the field of space, and we know we're doing our little bit as a group, learning about these things in a cosmic way, learning about them. And one day being very effective in helping to reorganize everything according to the divine plan as it embodies the divine will and divine purpose. So, friends, I'll leave the rest of it until tonight when Tuya presents this. And I'll just say that we're into cosmic thought. Now, what I've been doing with the identify as being thing, I haven't been dealing with the relative universe so much as the great divisions of the absolute deity, and the universe. It's been very, very global. But we know we have to study the details, especially on this particular presentation on the second ray, the ray of detailed unity and meticulous entirety. So you can carry forward in your own life, doing this, and with your group, we'll continue to learn, will continue to intensify. And I'll tell you what, let's just close with the great invocation, because I think, it's such a triangle. If you think about it, light, love, and power, so important. And then, of course, there's, you might say, there's a triangle above, and then humanity and the earth. So there's a fourth point that the triangle feeds. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the hearts of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Friends, we want to thank you for participating in this, hopefully, mind-expanding, speculative work on the planet, the solar system, and the cosmos. And then when it comes to, what we're doing right here among, within the human race and with our friends and spiritual associates, will take the normal course of action. But meanwhile, your consciousness will continue to expand and your knowledge will continue to expand. So tonight, 5 o'clock broadcast, and I think Joe has that. Yep, there it is. You can just copy that out of the chat box, and most of you have it, of course, but just in case you don't, there it is. So many blessings, lots of love, and this will be converted and put up on Makara, and you can recommend it to your friends. And if you wish to review anything that is said, you can do that too. Let's just keep studying. We've got 6 years here, and then something new. Wow, something new hits us from the master teacher. So let's be ready for that by all we have absorbed. Okay, bye-bye for now, and have a nice day, or night, or evening, or whatever it is, and we'll see at least some of you in another, whatever it is, almost 24 hours, not almost 12 hours, but not quite. Okay, bye-bye.